the best ways to reset your neuropathic connections is the first thing you do. That's why they tell you, if you want to wake up in the morning, you want to create real change, wake up in the morning, and within the first few minutes you wake up, brush your teeth with your left hand. Get your motor skills going. I learned that from fighting, right? So why do we do that? Because our brain will set our patterns for the day based on what it does within the first few minutes of waking up, right? So if you want to start a new behavior and do something, you need to do that. Learn a new language. Start speaking that new language within the first 5 minutes that you wake up in the morning, where you're looking at yourself in the mirror. Like, these are things that you can do to trick yourself into doing better. So I use the same concept with marijuana. I'd wake up in the morning, within the first 5 minutes of being awake in the morning, I'd be sitting on my front porch with a coffee, and I'd be getting high.
All right, folks, this is the second episode in a 2-episode drop where I'm talking to Anthony. He is the Reverend from the Stoned Apes podcast, a great new podcast that discusses the issues surrounding mental health and how plant medicine is going to be one of the elements in allowing us to heal as a community. So this is part 2 of our conversation. We go into a whole bunch of different topics related to marijuana and how to rewire your brain, and is a great conversation for anybody that's looking to start exploring the inner depths of their consciousness and healing from trauma related to service. So stay tuned. Hey folks, sitting down with Anthony Canania. Did I pronounce it right? Canania or Canania?
It's Canania, but it's the same thing. All sounds great.
Canania.
The Canadian version is the Canania, or whatever you said it. Yeah, that's the Canadian version.
Okay, so I put the wrong emphasis on it, just like when folks say Morrow and not Morrow. But look, all names aside, Anthony here has got a really cool podcast. We connected before we went down to the Military Influencer Conference this past November in Las Vegas, because through our own shared network, I learned about his podcast. He learned about my podcast, and we immediately connected and started hitting it off. And I've been on his podcast, so that episode will have dropped by the time this podcast drops. So definitely go check out that. We're going to be talking about his podcast and how it got started. And he's got such an interesting backstory, and I don't know nearly enough of it, but just at first glance, Anthony, you look like a dangerous MMA fighter, but you come from business, academia. You're a sweetheart, man. I'm not going to lie. You're a freaking sweetheart. You've just got that permanent kind of murder face, and I've got it too, man. I know what it's like to have that kind of aggressive face, but you're definitely not the type of dude that I would consider aggressive and mean, but one that's got tons of insights in the realm of plant medicine and the veteran world and how to heal our veteran community. So welcome to the show, man. It's really cool to have you here chatting again, and I want to learn a little more about where you're coming from and what was the genesis behind the Stoned Apes podcast?
No, absolutely. Well, first off, man, thank you for having me. I am honored to be here. To be a guest on your show is a big privilege, and one that I was really nervous about. So when you told me last week, you were like, hey, I'm going to have you on the show. And then I started watching like my website go off, and I was like, oh shit, he's researching me. Okay. This is going to be a good interview. So I'm as curious to see how this goes as anyone else, because I have no clue where we're going with this. We've talked on several occasions, obviously, but when you started doing research into my background and history and asking me questions, I was like, oh shit, he may know more about me than I do. So we're gonna have to get in that. But yeah, so you mentioned the Stoned Apes. So I am the host of the Stoned Apes podcast, and the Stoned Apes name came originally from this idea of the Stoned Apes theory. And when we wanted to start our podcast, it was just a bunch of dudes hanging out in a gym. You mentioned MMA. So there we were. It's 10th Planet, Crystal City. We're hanging out at the gym. I teach Muay Thai down there. And then also did a little bit of the jiu-jitsu stuff. But I don't teach jiu-jitsu. I need to be very clear about that. I'm like a blue belt in jiu-jitsu. Like, I'm good enough to like get tapped out by people, and that's about it. But I'm not teaching anybody shit in that realm. But
the struggle is real, man.
Yeah, dude. But we're sitting there and we're all hanging out and we're having a good time, and we would sit around and we'd talk. And next thing you know, people in the gym would be sitting around listening to us talk. And as coaches, you're relatively looked at in a certain way of influence, and you have a very much a mentor relationship with your students. And they look at you for not just martial arts advice, but life advice and guidance and all these other things that, as we know, martial arts is a journey of one's spirit and mind. And so there's a lot that goes into that. And so everybody was like, yeah, you should start a podcast. And I thought, oh, great, man, we'll start a podcast. But, originally we named the name was actually founded by Eric, the owner of 10th Planet. And he came up with the Stoned Apes off the Stoned Apes theory. And the idea was that when early hominid came across these psilocybin mushrooms, that they would take and interact with these mushrooms, and they were following their food essentially. So as they were following the cattle, the bison, things like that across the plains, they would be eating the mushrooms that grew out of their shit. And then that would essentially allow them to be able to do what they're doing. And so this was kind of a cool thing, but we were going at it from the aspect of personal development. And what the idea was is that you could do something that would enlighten your mental way of being or your mental thinking, and that you could grow and expand your consciousness through thought and personal growth. And so we started as a personal growth platform, and the mushrooms had very little to do with it. I had experimented a little bit with some microdosing. I did smoke cannabis, so the stoned part worked for me. And I thought, well, I love to get high, so let's get high and call it the fucking Stoned Apes. This works. And so that's kind of where it started. It really didn't actually start to do anything with mushrooms until about, I would say until about show number like 35 or 36 before it really started moving in that direction. So it had been on for some time before we had owned the name, so to speak.
Right on. I just got your website up here, the Stoned Apes podcast website. I have to say, one of the reasons why I'm checking out your website so much is that it's so well done. I'm like, man,
thank you.
I need to up my game. I need to get a podcast website that looks at least half as good as this one. And so you said your episode, it was 36 that started bringing
something like
that.
It was in the mid 30s. Boone was our 33. So Boone Cutler was our episode number 33. Yeah, if you go down there a little bit. And then if you come up from that, what did we do? We did Dogs for Our Brave, Outlaw Life. I would say the Grunt Style Foundation, and then definitely coming up toward like psychedelic medicine. That would have been our big launch for the psychedelic medicine, I think would have been in 39. So we did a little bit on the foundation side of it because the foundation does psychedelic therapy, and they're big in that, especially with their work with the VA and other veterans in that space and first responders in that space. But when I got hooked up with Eatman Thampy out of the Great State Strategies, he does the Missouri Psychedelic Society, and they have a great team. That he has really been, he's a lobbyist, and he works with senators and a bunch of other people in Missouri and then all throughout the country, all the way to Washington, D.C. and back. And when I started to get hooked up with him and I started to see the research and I started to see how much was actually going into this conversation, that it wasn't some recreational spaced conversation. That's why it's getting legitimacy. The fight for legalization of cannabis and legalization of mushrooms is actually completely different, and people don't realize that. And I didn't either. When I first got into this, I thought, oh, well, it's just, we want to recreationalize marijuana. And so everybody wanted to have legal rec. And, they came from a very recreational space. And there is a big difference between doing marijuana recreationally and doing mushrooms or psilocybin recreationally. There is a big dip between doing 5 grams and going on a hero's journey and doing a microdose. So this was definitely this is a big conversation for me, and I didn't understand it. But the reason why it's being taken so seriously is because there's actual research. Science is proving what a lot of people already knew. And it's a different conversation than what took part in the cannabis section, because I do think, and in fact, I just shot a podcast with Waxy Brown out of Waxy Brown's Cannabis Review, and they are on the recreational side of marijuana. They're also on the recreational side of mushrooms. And this was a very challenging conversation for me because it really pinned their world versus mine, where I came to plant medicine as a therapy, as a tool, as a legitimate medicine. They came to plant medicine as a drug, as something to have fun with. And though I do see both sides, I'm going to lie to you if I tell you I don't smoke weed to have a good time. Like I do. There are times where I set my intentions, and my intentions is to get fucked up and to watch this movie with my wife and have a good evening. Like that's my intentions. My intention is to get super stoned, veg out, eat a bunch of munchies, and watch this show. Like there is no work being done here other than having a good time. But mushrooms is a different thing. And other psychedelics are different. MDMA, psilocybin, and then you get into like ibogaine and all this other stuff, right? So, but it's a conversation that needs to be had, because access and availability to plant medicine is different than use of plant medicine. And we can't, if we're going to restrict how people use plant medicine, then we also got to restrict how people can get availability to plant medicine. And this is where the compromises start. So, I started taking it seriously when I got hooked up with them, and we started doing the lobbying and getting involved in the research. And once I started to see the science that went into it, I became a believer. And then honestly, we've went off the deep end a little bit, where we've really stepped into the plant medicine space quite a bit, because, we can. I think that's really it. Everybody's looking for their platform, and I'm aligned with a bunch of people that are doing a bunch of great work. Epen is doing great work with the Missouri Psychedelic Society on trying to get the message out, but he is not a media platform. The Grunstyle Foundation is doing a lot of work getting legislation passed, getting people to medicine, and working with legislators and working with the VA and all these other, but they are not a media platform podcast that can directly get people to plant medicine. They can't funnel people to Colombia to go see Carlos. They just can't do that. That's outside of the realm of what they can do. So that opened the door for us. And I thought, you know what? We can. Hey, look at us. We're perfectly in line, where we're in the best place for both, where we can actually get people to the medicine, and we can do some real healing and create some real change here. And so we decided to kind of slide into that space, because we could do what others couldn't.
Right on. Sorry, there's a bit of a lag there.
Yeah, it's okay. I was waiting for it to pass. I seen your eyes disappear, and I figured, well, there's something going on. Unless
something
I said
going
something
on there. Dave's just taking off.
Hey, if I say something good that it leaves you like this for 2 minutes, I'm just going to own it. I'll just be like, I did that right there.
well, look, seeing as that this is the Stoned Apes podcast, I couldn't disrespect the Reverend and not have at least half a gummy before getting involved on the podcast.
Legit.
So I can't smoke in here. So I had my half a gummy. Now, full disclosure, I am a complete and utter lightweight, even though I've been using cannabis and a little microdosing of psilocybin for the last few years. Man, I can't do much more than like 2.5 milligrams, 5 milligrams. And I'm flying, man. And I know guys that can really dig deep into the gummies, and like 50 milligrams is like a good night. I think I'd be
that's
dead.
an average dose.
I think I'd end up in Pluto, and it'd just be that's it. I'd be gone. I wouldn't be coming back.
I can take a 50 and probably smoke one or two before the evening's over. That's about where my tolerance is at. And that's I've
got friends like that.
That's after taking a tolerance break, because I got to a point there for a while to where I like couldn't get high anymore. And, I was dropping like 150 and I was smoking like 4 or 5 joints in a row.
What?
And yeah, it was ridiculous. My tolerance got way too high.
Okay. Okay. I know we're talking about entertainment value. So yeah. So, well, hey, I am too, man, but I've got no tolerance for the green at all.
What were you saying about what were you saying about entertainment value?
I want to stay on this, but I want to get back to the plant medicine push in the veteran space. I'll get back to it, but
let's do it.
In terms of getting like fucked up. So I think, especially here in Canada, right? Because as you know, we had cannabis legalized and given to us for free if you had an injury as a veteran. So if you're released for any injury whatsoever, the government was like, or the VA here was just like, all right, yeah, sure, sounds good. And you start at 3 grams per day, which coming from, I'm coming from the traditional health and science space. I don't know shit about cannabis. I didn't even smoke in high school. And when I was in the military, I was like, no, it's not allowed. I was a very different senior NCO when I served compared to what I am now. I guess it's what you call growth. So I started consuming, right? And I didn't know anything. Dude, I think I took 10 milligrams of just, I had like pills. I was like, no, I'm going to stick to, I like pills because it's like a Tylenol. I know that. I know how much I'm getting. So I got recommended to take like 3, which is like 15 milligrams. Dude, the rats that were like coming at me when I was falling asleep through the walls, because I literally had mice in my walls because it was the winter time and they like crawl through and stuff like that. I tripped so hard. I was like, what the hell is this shit, man? And then I see like buddies and like you're talking about like 150 milligrams. I don't know, man. Like I don't think I'd be in this like plane of existence if I did
Well, it
150. I
takes a
think that would be it for
lot
me.
of it takes a lot of effort and intention to get that kind of tolerance. Um, it took me from November of 2022 until I would say uh June or July of 23 before I had to take a tolerance break. And so what happened was is I
Oh
had
wow.
done I had done edibles for the longest time, and I didn't have any problems with edibles. But when I was doing the edibles, I was trying to cure like what I thought was potentially cancer. And so I was trying to cure cancer, and
Mm,
that's what I was doing the edibles for. And then I ran into a article my mom sent to me. My mom was super big about not wanting me to do marijuana and all this other stuff, which she was fine with me being an alcoholic because drinking is okay. But when I started smoking
part of the
cigarettes,
culture.
yeah, when I started smoking cigarettes and smoking weed, like that was not okay. And so she had intervention time, right? And so she started sending me these articles from the DARE program from back in the 80s, and they talked about how marijuana can change your DNA and how they can start changing and causing these other neuropathic modifications and behavioral modifications, and how if you're depressed, it'll amplify depression and cause you to be more depressed. And it was a bunch of negative press. But when I started to look at it, the only thing I could see was the mechanics of like what exactly cannabis has the potential to do in the body. And I went, oh, this makes complete sense. No wonder it works. Oh, I also see why it's so dangerous. And this is where you come back to this conversation of personal responsibility.
Yeah.
These drugs are dangerous. Alcohol is fucking dangerous. Like it's arguably more dangerous than cannabis in many ways. But
Yep.
there's no assumed personal responsibility. It's like, don't I have a responsibility to choose how much I interact with this plant or with this alcohol or with whatever it is? Don't I have a certain level of responsibility with my choice and my decisions in it? And if that's true, then I choose how I'm going to interact with it. And this thing that also has the potential to be incredibly destructive possesses the potential to be incredibly positive and incredibly effective when used correctly. And so I said, well, we don't know anything until we do our own research. So anecdotally, I decided I was doing this really good cognitive and behavioral therapy program called Mojo at the time, and I was going through it, and it was doing wonders for my self confidence, wonders for my anxiety, and all this other stuff that I had going on, and PTSD, and I started this program, and then really quickly kind of evolved into like adapting into like everything that I was doing in my life. And I just thought, man, I wonder how much better this would work if I got high when I did it. And so I started researching
Mhm.
marijuana a little bit more, understood there was different ways that your body interacts with cannabis and the cannabinoid system versus edibles versus smoking. And so I started smoking it, and I did it with the combination with my therapy, and I believe that it did work, and it worked really well. And what it would do is it would allow me to get to a base to where I could function. I wasn't so high strung all the time, and it brought me down to where I could
Yeah.
interact with the world around me a little bit clearer, a little bit better. Maybe I was impaired to a degree. I do think that my ability to think and clearly process things sometimes was a little not so good. Right? You just can't be high all the time. It's
Yep.
not really advisable. But I did that for months. I would literally smoke 5 to 10 joints a day. I would, and it was spliffs, so it wasn't like I was smoking full joints, but I was staying moderately high all the time. From the time I woke up in the morning, they say one of the best ways to reset your neuropathic connections is the first thing you do. That's why they tell you if you want to wake up in the morning, you want to create real change. Wake up in the morning, and within the first few minutes you wake up, brush your teeth with your left hand. Get your motor skills going. I learned that from fighting, right? So why do we do that?
Yeah.
Because our brain will
Yeah.
set our patterns for the day based on what it does within the first few minutes of waking up. Right. So if you want to start a new behavior, a new something, you need to do that. Learn a new language. Start speaking that new language within the first 5 minutes that you wake up in the morning while you're looking at yourself in the mirror. Like these are things that you can do to trick yourself into doing better. So I use the same concept with marijuana. I'd wake up in the morning, and within the first 5 minutes of being awake in the morning, I'd be sitting on my front porch with the coffee, and I'd be getting high. And I did it, and it worked, and it did exactly what I wanted it to do. But then there were negatives that came from it too. The negatives was I was high all the time. I smelled like weed all the time. I think this wasn't a sustainable thing, but it was never
Right.
meant to be sustainable. It was meant to get me down the path that I needed to be on long enough to get the results that I was looking for. And then once I got the results that I was looking for, once I realized that this is no longer serving me, and that's kind of where I got to with my tolerance, is it got so high that I was not really getting high anymore. The impact of what I was doing was starting to go away. Really didn't need the marijuana to keep the improvements and to set the intentions and do the things that I was looking at doing. So I just took a tolerance break, and I took like 2 months off, 3 months off, something like that. But I basically I quit right before Aya, went to ayahuasca, came back from ayahuasca, and then I waited another 2 or 3 weeks, and then I finally lit a joint up again for the first time. But my tolerance has always been higher. I'm Irish, and whether it doesn't matter what I do, everything I do is, it's like when I drink whiskey, I drink glasses of whiskey. I just pour the whiskey into the glass and drink it. Like, I don't measure shots and shit. Like, I can drink 3 glasses of whiskey whether I drink or not. Like, that's just who
Oh,
I am.
attaboy.
Yeah, I mean,
Attaboy there, Tony. Attaboy there,
yeah,
Tony.
so but yeah, the edibles is definitely where it's at with me, and I have a higher tolerance in those areas. But I routinely take tolerance breaks, and I do things like that just so that, again, these still are, whether they're medicine or not. Even if it's a medicine, what do you do with medicine? You cycle off of it. You don't use your medicine
Mm-hmm.
every day. That's the point. That's what we try to get people off of prescription drugs. Well, why would I tell you to get off of a prescription drug and then sign you up to being tied to cannabis for the rest of your life? No, it's a tool. Let's use
Yeah.
it as a tool,
Mm-hmm.
right? Let's use it as something that we can stop, start, walk away from any given moment, any given day. That's why I quit smoking. I quit
Well,
cigarette smoking because it was just it was a crutch.
mm-hmm. Yeah, like we said earlier about being intentional. So you went into this with the intent of having it help you get better, which is, I think, lost in the conversation because when I started, I came up with my own, not because anybody recommended it, because realistically, we talked to a nurse. It's online like this. They say, "Oh, what do you need it for?" I'm like, "Well, my back is messed up, my knee's messed up." They're like, "Oh, for pain?" Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. And then they just say, "Here, take this." There's no real guidance, right? There's no real idea of what the plant is about, and this whole idea that you need to have some sort of intention when you consume this plant medicine so that it can actually do the work that you want it to do was really thanks to Ryan, right? Ryan Carey, that
Mm-hmm.
who you know, and when he had his experience out in Colombia with ayahuasca, so you need to respect the plant, and you need to have an intention. And so I had my own for my back pain, and I felt that there was a relief that allowed me to get into better positions for flexibility, mobility, weight training. And so I was using it pretty regularly for almost the same, kind of theory that you had, right? It's getting me to a place where I'll be better. And
Mm-hmm.
so I found a lot of benefit, but just like you, I also found that at a certain point, I don't need this anymore. Now, I didn't do a lot of smoking just because I don't like smoking. So I would do a lot of edibles, and that was great for me. And I found it was the right drug at the right time, but now it doesn't have the same purpose for me anymore. And more like you, I don't drink booze anymore, man. I've really kind of switched off of it because I don't like feeling like shit the next morning. I don't like the amount of calories I get from it. And if I switch to marijuana and have a joint just to get fucked up, man, it's great. I feel awesome. Like, and then have a great sleep. And then I wake up and I'm like, fresh as the daisy.
Yeah.
So that whole idea of setting an intention is really important. And I think if anybody that's considering going down the route of plant medicine, it's really finding either the right teachers or the right guides to help you use it so you don't abuse it. And I think, just like you said with alcohol too, all these things exist in our society, and it's about responsible use and intentional use. And as soon as you go down that road of abuse, now you've lost the plot. You're not getting the benefit, because although I don't see there's much benefit to alcohol, there is a reason why it's part of our culture, and that's because it lowers inhibitions and it helps you just de-stress, man. Like, let's be honest, if you're
Mm-hmm.
not abusing it, it's a great down regulator. So from your perspective, like, obviously you've got a platform and you're talking about plant medicine. Now, if we shift more to, the, I don't want to say the harder drugs, because that's like old school way of describing things like ayahuasca, DMT, even let's say LSD, like all these other what we call drugs. Typically, they're all plant based, and especially ayahuasca. There's a ceremony that goes with it. What's your take on how important that is for the veteran community to start revisiting these ancient practices in order to start healing and getting better?
Well, I think it's an important conversation for everyone, all communities. And if you look at the basics of how these drugs work, let's get rid of all the pseudoscience out of it, and let's just get down to the science. So, Dr. Siegel out of Washington University does a brain imaging research that he has done through there, and he is specifically studying psilocybin. And a lot of other researchers have done similar studies, and what they're finding is there is a guaranteed connection between the neuropathic response in a brain that is not affected with psilocybin versus one that is. So when you look at neuroplasticity levels and you look at the amount of new neural connections and things that are being created with the introduction of psilocybin specifically, or any other hallucinogen, they all work relatively the same. They just have different things in the body that they push on, right? They are better suited at healing certain things. For example, like ibogaine. Ibogaine's been getting a lot of press lately. It's one of the greatest, most powerful psychedelics out there, but it is also one of the few that are dangerous. I think it kills something like 1 in 3 people that take it or something like that. It may be
Oh, wow.
1 in 30. It has a serious side effect of having a heart issue. So what they have to do in order to put people on this medicine, they have to screen them, and they go through this very elaborate health screening process, and then those that qualify are allowed to go get the treatment. And you got to ask yourself, it's like, why in the fuck would you risk something like that? Well, here's the reason: because it has a better than an 80% chance of healing opioid addiction in the first go. One treatment and
Wow.
opioid addiction is gone, permanently reversed, done. Well, you got to ask yourself, how many people are we putting in the ground because of opioids? Well, and you can go to your doctor and get that. What is a drug? Like, that's another thing that we got to really have a conversation on. What is a drug? Because I can go to my doctor and get Vicodin. I can go to my doctor and get prescribed Oxy. I can go to my doctor and get all of this shit. And when I take it from there, nobody says you're doing a drug. But if you're doing cannabis, you're doing a drug. If you sit down one time with ayahuasca or ibogaine, the legislators are considering these conversations because the stuff works. Because more people are dying as a result of opioid addiction than are dying because of the result of ibogaine. And then when you look at the comparison between the two, ibogaine is infinitely safer and it's effective. So what's essentially happening is you have all these people out there that are injured through trauma. And it doesn't matter what the trauma is. It doesn't matter whether it's war trauma, EMS trauma, firefighter trauma because somebody was mean to you when you were 4 years old, or because you got raped or molested as a kid. Trauma is trauma. And all trauma impacts your brain the same way. It's brain damage. And then you combine that with shit that happens in your life. Like, I don't know, all the high school athletes out there that get hit in the head 8,000 times before they graduate high school. You get out of life and you bang your head on who knows what. You go into the military, you get blown up, you bang your head, you do like me, you get out of the military after getting blown up, and then you decide it's a good idea to get punched in the head for the next 20 years. Like, my CTE is pretty fucking significant. Like, this is a real
You're doing
thing.
great. You're doing great, by the way.
Yeah, like, I mean, it's up there, but we have to have medicines. And why are these important conversations? Because these medicines create neuroplasticity change. When I have, and I know you understand this very well because we've talked about this in the past, but let's look at my life a few years ago when I got to the point of depression, to the first time I had considered suicide. Now, it took a long time of history of depression to get to the point to where I finally decided I'm going to kill myself. Like, this is what I'm going to fucking do. Up until that point, there's every reason in the world not to do it. So it's resistant. Why? I don't have a neural pathway yet that is connected between the thought of sadness and hope and despair and the thought of ending my own life. But then all of a sudden, one day, I make the decision that I'm going to end my own life, and I solidify that, and I say, that's something that I want to fucking do. Well, now the next time I get depressed, I put in a highway. It doesn't take years of depression anymore to get me to suicide. It takes 3 seconds, one trigger, and then I'm back to that space because I created this highway that goes straight to suicide. And so now it becomes the first answer, not the last. Well, that is a sign, and just one of many signs of what a trigger can be. Two, what a neural pathway is. My ambigula took in that outside data from my environment. It determined that that's the direction that it wanted to go. I went into a fight or flight response. That gets sent over, that gets processed, and then all of a sudden, all of my behaviors and reactions are going off of what I just came into my environment and based on my fight or flight response. If I want to have real change, what do I need to do? I need to reset that fight or flight response, because I can look at that situation. I can say, hey, based on this stimuli, based on this thing that happened to me, I don't actually think I should have went into fight or flight in that moment. That was the wrong answer. The right answer is I really should have went into feed and breed. Maybe that shit should have made me hungry. Maybe I should have just not cared about it. Maybe I should have got fucking horny. Who knows? But one way or the other, my body didn't respond the way that my rational brain told me I should have. Well, that's a problem. But we have tools for that. Inner psychedelic medicine. I can now address those issues. Now I can do this through cognitive and behavioral therapy. It will also change the same neuropathic connections, and it will eliminate triggers much slower. What is psychedelic medicine? It's your brain on steroids. It's the ability to be able to get in, to do these therapies, and then to get accelerated results because you have an accelerated path of healing. You can recreate neural pathways better. When I got back from ayahuasca, my head physically felt different for greater than 2 weeks. I could feel my brain changing. I could feel it growing. I could feel new connections forming. I could feel shit going different. And I have not thought the same since I've been back. So it doesn't matter what you want to put around it, whether it's spiritual or whatever. If you just look at the fact that something physically changed in my brain that allowed me to form new neuropathic connections, that eliminated for me the trigger of suicide and brought me to a space of healing. What more do you need to know? Medicine worked. Done. But it took work on my end as well. It's not just this is going to fix it, because it's like steroids, and I used steroids in the past, so I can talk about this pretty heavily. And you know a lot about steroids as well because of what you do and the scientific background that you have. Steroids don't do the work for you. I know a lot of guys that do roids. When I was in the MMA world and powerlifting, I took roids all the time. And you know what? I look like a giant fat dude. I look a lot more like I do roids now than I ever did when I did all the roids. I was running stacks. Like I got Anavar and the testosterone, and I'm running my Decabolin, and I'm running stacks. I'm just a big, fat, puffy dude. Like there's nothing fit about me at all, because steroids don't make you buff. What steroids do is they give you the ability to recover. So if I can walk into the gym that week and I can do 1 to 3 exercises that week and I can get full recovery from those exercises. Well, if I go on gear, well, then I can do 30 of those exercises and still recover. So the guy that's on gear that looks like he's on gear, he looks like he's on gear because he's actually doing 3 and 4 times the work that the people without the gear aren't doing, because they can't do it without getting injured, which is why he's on the gear. The gear doesn't do the work for you. It just gives you the ability to do the work. And that's exactly what psychedelic medicine is. It's gear for your brain.
Interesting. That's a really good one-liner right there. That is a great quote.
Yeah, I was hoping that you could cut that for me and just send it to me on the back end. That'd be great. It's like, oh, damn, I did pretty good. Look at that. Stealing that.
It's like that's t-shirt worthy on that one. I think you can put that in a t-shirt. I'll buy it. That's really cool how you made that comparison. And the steroids and anabolic, right? So by definition, it's a builder, and you only build after you've torn things down. So in line with that analogy, right? If we're looking at, because I haven't done anything more than microdosing psilocybin, but I have an interesting story from that. So I'll get into it in a second. But if you're rewiring, there had to have been some kind of breaking down, and then that's allowing that brain to kind of build back up. And like you said, we go through traumas, and trauma is trauma, right? And it's often to kind of play the trauma Olympics. But it's like, yo, my trauma was fucking bigger than yours. So it's like, it doesn't matter because your body keeps the score, right? It really doesn't fucking matter. And like, once you get past that, you're like, okay, I'm mature enough to just accept that, you getting like spanked as a kid and me seeing my buddy get, not saying this is an actual thing to happen, but me seeing my buddy get blown into fucking a million pieces, we can still have the same physiological response. In whatever situation that triggers us. And that's where, the understanding has to come from. And anecdotally, I don't know if you listened to the episode I did with Toby Miller, where he's talking about, he's a Canadian Armed Forces dude.
I literally
He
just
was
shot
talking
an
about,
episode with Toby like 2 days ago. I
oh,
stole
no
him right off
shit.
your
Okay,
show.
you guys
Right off your
connected?
show. Yeah.
Okay,
I
right
even
on.
contacted him and I was like, I listened to you on Dave's show. Now come on mine. And it worked.
Yeah, man. Okay, so for folks that haven't listened, I can't remember the number of the episode on my show, but definitely go check out the episode with Tony's episode, because he's a great advocate by accident for plant medicine, because his story is so wild. He went from, was it 36 or 26 medications down to one. He had psychotic breaks. He wasn't doing well, and he figured, well, I might as well give this a try. And he describes his experience of being out of his body, seeing his spine kind of, or his back opened up, and seeing his spinal cord and spirits, whatever you want to call them, literally taking like wires out and rewiring like a circuit board. And he's like, after that, he's like, man, I don't know what it was, man. He's like, but I don't have the rage. I don't have the same responses to triggers that I normally would have. And that it talks to what you're talking about, you know, your neurons are firing. Those that fire together wire together. So everybody understands this fundamentally. That's why you practice anything. It's to practice that behavior, that if it's an instrument, if it's a sport, but our ability to kind of rationalize things in our environment, and trauma is no different. Like you said, you didn't have the feeling to go, oh, I should probably kill myself, up until you did, and you created that highway. And it's fascinating to hear not only yourself, but so many other veterans talk about the exact same thing. So it's like, my brain doesn't feel the same, and I feel really good now. And it's like there was a split in the railroad track, and now I just think this way as opposed to that way. And it's all thanks to having the openness to go try something new, which is ayahuasca. And it's just really cool to hear. And I just wanted to bring up to talk about, like, go a little bit deeper in this conversation and like where we're going as a community. So I think I sent this to you, right? Because I don't think you're a LinkedIn guy. I think I kind of sorted you out for not having a LinkedIn account that I
haven't done that
share
yet.
to. So it's okay.
My
Here,
LinkedIn profile is like 10 years old.
So,
like, it doesn't count. I don't even know my password. I'm going to have to look that up one of these days. Oh, yeah. You sent this to me. I read
Tim
this
Jensen.
article.
Yeah.
Yeah, that guy. So, I know him too.
And I think you know Tim. I think you know Tim.
Yeah, I met him a few times.
Tim's a great guy. Yeah, Tim's a great guy, folks. If you don't know who Tim Jensen is, he's the co-owner at Grunt Style, which is the organization, the apparel company, and the foundation that does a lot of great work down in the States. So if you're not clued in as to who they are, I'll drop some links here in the description. So what I've pulled up here is just the article that's in DAV, which is it's a veterans group, right? DAV, Disabled American Veterans, is that it? .org? I'm not quite sure.
I'm sure. I have no idea.
I'd have to look that up myself. It's the topic of the or the title of the article is Veterans and the New Psychedelic Renaissance. So I'm going to post the link here. The fact that it popped up on my feed, and it was Tim that posted it, and I think it was last year or 2 years ago, I just randomly on a podcast said, I think we're in the middle of a veteran renaissance.
Oh yeah.
To see this article now using the term renaissance, because I feel like this is it, because there's an explosion of new ideas. There is this new creativity that's coming out from our community. It's like there's a rebirth, because it's been 10 years more or less that the hard fighting was done during a global war on terror. And it's like those of us that were able to kind of get back on our feet, figure things out, are now able to talk about things and bring a new paradigm to the community that is likely going to catch on like wildfire within the non-military community, because I think what we're talking about here is a fundamental truth that we've been missing for a little while. So what's your take on this whole new resurgence of psychedelics within the veteran community? Do you think it's here to stay? Do you think it's something that is going to be beneficial long term for the community?
Oh, I absolutely think it's here to stay, and I have a lot of reasons to think that. One, you look at pharmaceutical drugs, and most pharmaceutical drugs are plant-based medicine. right? So all those opioids that I mentioned earlier, right? That's all comes from cocaine, right? The cocoa plant, and you know, and then we have opium and all these other things that comes out of that. So there's a laundry list of reasons why I think that that's the case, but it all boils down to is it's a tool. It's a tool that's been given to us that we know does certain things, and as long as we have a vested interest in maintaining our health as a priority and not our health care, because I think that can get go a different direction, right? As long as we can keep the health care out of the healthcare system, I think that we will be fine. I think that the more that we get into the healthcare system with it, and the more the psychedelic medicine becomes streamlined and you know, they break it down to synthesize it and do all these other things, I think that you're going to probably start running into some issues, and then those issues have the potential to end the train, so to speak. But that hasn't seemed to bother the case either when it comes to other pharmaceuticals. It seems to be the case that, you know, once they get FDA regulation and they get what they need and they can make money out of it, that's really all that matters. It just seems like it's a fight up until that point. From there, it doesn't matter what it is. Look at this newest drug. You know, what is that weight loss? Ozempic. That thing's killing fucking people left and right. That thing is.
Ozempic,
They just had they
semaglutide.
just put a thing out the other day that they had all these people dying on surgery tables, and they couldn't figure out why people were dying through random operations. They find out it's this drug. Now they tell people, yeah, you should stop taking it 3 months before you know you're going to have a fucking surgery or some shit. They
Oh
already
shit!
know. They know there are pharmaceutical drugs out there, and this isn't trying to like pick on this drug. The fact of the matter is there are pharmaceutical drugs out there like this and much worse that are prescribed, given to people on a daily basis, every single day, that if you, like Toby, if you were on 26 of these things on high level dosages, nobody would think shit about it. If I told you that I was doing 26 recreational drugs right now, you would lose your shit. Like, seriously.
Like, dude, how do you have the time?
And then I told you I did that every day. Like, I imagine a lot of your audience is freaking out. They're like, oh my God, he smoked 10 joints a day. That dude was taking 16 more pills than that every day.
Yeah.
And that is not raise an eyebrow. In fact, that's called medicine. And that's the problem. Mm-hmm. So I don't think this is going to go away anytime soon. I think that as we learn more about it, as we understand more, and we get further down this road of healing, and then the other part of that is everybody needs this healing. Like you said, trauma is trauma. It doesn't matter. Look, and nobody's trauma is greater than another one. How the human being responds to the trauma is the only thing that matters, and the healing is the same, regardless of the level of trauma. And so, and it also comes down to the individual's willingness to work through it, and whether or not, you know, Will Wisner, the executive director of the Grunstyle Foundation, he has a quote, and he made it outside of my house one night, and it really stuck with me. He said, there are people that want to be healed, and there are people that want to be healed. That's the difference. And if you are somebody who wants to be healed, you will find healing. If you're somebody that wants to be healed, then you'll be like a lot of your guys that you talk to that, yeah, I want to lose weight, but do you really? Do you really want to get fit? Stop eating a fucking cheeseburger. When are you going to put down the soda? Tell me more about how in shape you want to be. You either want to do it or you don't.
It's where the pain, the great way I had to explain it is, you know, it's the pain of change is not as great as the pain of staying the same. Once you do that, then you'll change. But if the pain of changing is too great, you're just going to be like, you know, you want to seem virtuous. Yeah, I want to get fit. I want to get healthy. Okay, well, these are the things you're going to have to do in order to do it. Oh, really? Yeah, man. Oh, yeah, but I don't want to eat, you know, like meat and eggs for breakfast. Okay, cool. So how's that breakfast that you've been eating for the last 30 years been treating you? Like, you're fucking 40 pounds overweight, man. Like, I think it's time for you to change. And that's where you could, you know, our podcast, right? I'm a purveyor, or I shouldn't say purveyor, but a conduit for just knowledge that's out there. So for some, they're all they need is just the knowledge. They're ready. They'll change, you know. But for most folks, if you're kind of not sure, you might need a little nudge. It's just, how willing are you? What's your willingness to actually make a change? And once you kind of open up, and I had this feeling, right? Like it was just a general openness to life. I had a very black and white way of looking at things, and it really was the war and coming back. And I realized things aren't quite as what I thought they were. And I hit 30. And then there's just that moment where I put my 20-year-old arrogance away and realized, man, I don't know shit about shit. Like, what do I know? And then things started to change because I was injured. I was having a hard time kind of adapting. And then I just realized, man, if I don't open myself up to new experiences and change, things aren't going to go well. And that's where, things like cannabis, psilocybin, training, everything just kind of all comes together. So I wonder if that's something that you've noticed. People that start the journey, do they typically start and say, fuck it, I'm going to try ayahuasca like next week, let's go? Or is it more you see the gradual progression? Maybe they changed a political view. Maybe they changed the way they eat. Maybe they just decided, I'm just going to work out a little bit more. Have you noticed like a progression for folks? Maybe this happened to yourself too, that just allowed you to be more open to change?
Yeah, well, I have to preface this conversation with the fact that I'm really new to this space. Okay. I've only been in this space, for about 6 months or so. In fact, I think I only set with ayahuasca like 4 months ago or something at that point.
It's good. I've done 0.
Yeah, it may be less than that, right? So my evidence or opinion is limited here, but from what I have seen so far, and because of my platform and because of our connections in this space, I do get to see a lot of people, and I've witnessed a lot of people. So, even though the time frame isn't great, the amount of people that have came through my space in this area is great. And I would say it's a lot like health and fitness and nutrition. It's no different, right? Everybody, you got some that are like, oh, I'm all in. And then they jump all in and they do the work and they get it done. And then those are the success stories. Those are the before and after six packs, right? And then then you have the people that are, I think I'm kind of on board with this. And those are the ones that get the half results and like they're okay. And those are the ones that are still kind of out of shape and a little overweight and they'll never really look the way they want, but they're not entirely unhealthy. So, you just kind of let them do it. Then you got the people that come in, they're chronically overweight and they're obese and they're dying of high blood pressure and cholesterol and every other thing. And then they tell you how the only thing that they just tomorrow they're ready. And then tomorrow never fucking comes. The end of the day, they're always going to buy that Diet Coke. They're never going to put that shit down. And it's the same thing in the plant medicine space. You find people that want to be healed. Then you find people that want to be healed. And then you find people that get into the healing that are like, fuck this. This is way more work than I thought it was supposed to be. And then you get people in there and they make it. So it's a good mixed bag, but just like health and nutrition, it's really hard to do anything wrong. Like if you put into some effort, if you go on a walk for 45 minutes a day, you did something. You don't have to be Olympic athlete. Like you can do other things. And so there's a lot of stuff in this space too, whether it be, maybe you just do sauna and cold therapy. Maybe you do your box breathing method in combination with that. Maybe you learn to reset triggers. Maybe you do some mojo therapy. Maybe you do hyperbaric. I mean, there is a million different things that you could do to reset and work on your mental health. Do you meditate every day? That's what I'd say. If you don't do at least 5 minutes a day of meditation, at least once a day, why are we even talking about plant medicine? Explain to me how a deeper level of meditation through plant medicine is going to do you any good when you don't meditate to begin with. You have no familiarity with this space at all, and then you want to all of a sudden, it's like you don't do steroids at all, and you don't even go to the gym, and then I'm just going to take you to the gym. We're going to do deadlift day. Let's fucking do it. Like you're going to die. Like it's not going to work.
Like no, don't do that.
Yeah. Like come on, dude. Like, come on. Fucking deadlifts, 5x5s all day long. Have you heard of the West Side Method? Like
what's a barbell?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like you have to have some familiarity in the space, and because it's such a new area, you have to talk to everybody with kid gloves. Because people don't understand this space. And so they don't want the hard conversations, right? You got to go in there and kind of ease your way in. But this space needs just as much hard conversation as the fitness space. Because when you come here to do work. You come here to get healed, to find healing. You don't come here for somebody to look at you and say, oh man, it'd be nice if you found healing. Like if you want that, I mean, and no offense to anyone out there, but if you want that, go stand back in the line at the VA and wait for your prescription, because that's what you're doing. That's a label. That's not healing. There's a difference. And you either want your label or you want your healing, and then you can find your way. And for some people, thankfully, mine wasn't so bad. the first time around. I'm pretty sure I'm going to get my ass kicked at other goes. But my trauma, since we're playing the comparison game, my trauma compared to other people out there, look, I'm no Green Beret with 40 tours and all this other stuff. Like, I have met some people that have had absolutely excruciating
Insane.
experiences that I can't even put myself in the. My son just came home. I'll get with you in a minute, buddy. She was upstairs last time I was here. I'm sorry about that, brother.
Nice.
But we had what was I saying right before that?
You don't have as many tours as Green Berets, trauma.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but there's people that's had a lot more trauma than me, but in some of those people that had that terrible trauma, it may be a long, hard road to repair and to heal from that. Other people, not so much. It really just depends on the individual and their space. Everybody's healing is different and it's individual to them. So my thing would be, anybody considering this space would be, do you want to do the work? And you need to prepare for it. That's why we got so heavily involved, like with the podcast. What I decided to do with the podcast is that we would start bringing people to the medicine. That was my biggest thing. And I wanted to connect people. So I got hooked up with Ryan Carey at Operation Purify. That's your guy. And then he works with Carlos. And then we work with David and Cordy out of Mexico with the Becoming Om. They think they were on your podcast as well. And so in combination with a few people like that, we have already started to find ways to be able to bring people to the medicine. But I'm not qualified to facilitate the medicine. But what I am qualified to do is integrate people to and from the medicine. There's integration that needs to happen, just like you integrate people to and from the gym, to and from nutrition, to and from diet, right? All these other things. So integrating people to and from the medicine, it's like, what path are you on? Are you thinking about going to the medicine? Great, then you need to come over here. Are you on your way to medicine? Have you thought about it? Now you educated yourself a little bit and you're sure this is something you want to do? Well, then you're going to go on path B. Have you been to the medicine, but now you're thinking of doing the medicine again? Is there something else you're wanting to work on? Or are you just needing to integrate back from the medicine? Because look, coming from the medicine circle to day-to-day life is difficult in its own. People don't like to talk about that. Coming back to the matrix is not easy. So there's integration that happens before and after the healing that is a big part of the overall therapy. And so we decided that, I'm not skilled enough and I don't have the experience necessary to be able to do this medicine at the level that these plant medicine guides and people like that are doing it, because they have 10, 15 years of their life given to these practices. But what I can do is I can have people say, hey, look, I think I need healing. And then I can start a conversation with them and ask them, what kind of healing you're looking for? What's going on? Where are you at? How much have you thought about this in the past? How much do you know? What would you like to know more about? Here's a hop-based ceremony. This is just cannabis and tobacco, but it's a mild psychedelic experience. Why don't you experience this in ceremony and then see how that goes before you consider showing up at ayahuasca? So we can give people little ways to get to the medicine to determine like whether that healing is right for them, whether it's not right for them. But hopefully as the legalization conversation rises, there's a lot of people like me out there, because I didn't learn this on my own. This got taught to me. This got taught to me by all of these great mentors that are already in this space, that have already been working in this space, that are already doing the work in this space. As we get legalization, we are going to get those people that are going to come out of this space and they're going to be able to talk about it. The reason why I have the ability to talk about it loudly is, one, I have a media platform that allows me to do that. Two, I am not facilitating the medicine. I am bringing people to people who facilitate the medicine. So I'm not doing anything illegal. So I can be as public facing as I want to be in this space. But it's harder for some of the people that are actually facilitating in this space. If they're doing mushroom ceremonies or whatever the case, like, there are very specific things that you have to do in order to be able to have that legally done. And not everybody can afford to go to South America, to go to Peru or Colombia or Costa Rica or someplace like that to get to plant medicine.
Right. I brought up the Netflix documentary, How to Change Your Mind.
Okay.
Because of what we're just talking here, when it comes to bringing people to it and facilitating it, and the idea that you're open to heal, that's such an important message within our community, the veteran community, but just in general, because I think the reason why we are so unhealthy, and I'm just talking broadly, we're unhealthy people, man. We're sick. And I think it manifests itself a lot in the psychological issues we have. But we get stuck. You mentioned the matrix. It's like we're stuck in this matrix, and the matrix says, all right, you go to your doctor, they prescribe you a bunch of pills, you shut the fuck up, and like that is your healing, which we know fundamentally it's not healing us, man. It's just treating a symptom. And what I liked about this documentary here is that they talked about all the different psychedelics that are kind of having a resurgence, and you were mentioning legalization, and that's where a lot of this gets stuck because it's been deemed a drug, a hard drug, right? A class 1A, like bad. This is bad. This is as bad as it gets. It's basically like it's like you got heroin, right? It just seems so bizarre because it was only very recently, last 50, 60 years, that it became something that was full on illegal. Because before, we'd recognize that there was a valuable piece of it that we needed within our culture and our community, but we just demonized it. And so I like the fact that there's conversations. That's why I like having guys like yourself and guys like Dave and guys like Toby on the podcast, because they're not doctors. They're not coming from the healthcare system. They're coming from experience. And that's where I think most of the change is going to happen, is with experiential learning, especially within the veteran community, and talking to other veterans, being like, hey man, yeah, I did this thing. Yeah, it's actually pretty cool. Yeah. Hey, like you've probably been on whatever drugs for the last 10, 15 years. Why don't you just give this a try? Maybe it'll actually like get you better. And I think that's the conversation that a lot of us need to start having, man. So it's really cool that you got the podcast and that platform to do that. What's your most memorable conversation so far on the podcast?
Oh, on the podcast? Oh
Yeah.
man, a little bit of thought. But one of my favorite moments on the podcast, really honestly, was probably early into the podcast, and I'd shot with this with a fan of ours actually named Smoke, and he's called Gorilla Smoke now. He's lost a bunch of weight and all this stuff, but he was just one of our first guests, and he was actually my first fan. Like, he was the first person to actually declare himself a fan of the Reverend, and that was a mind fuck for me, man. Like, it took me a minute to kind of get
famous,
over that.
man.
You know, it was like, people don't realize how much of how challenging that is, like to look across the table and to see somebody who holds you with that kind of admiration. And then it was like, I ain't got to live up to this. Like, I'm not capable of that. And so I had a lot of struggle with that. But having the conversations with him and getting off in like the impact that we've been able to have in his life and stuff, that I think that was the biggest, or one of the most impactful conversations that I had. And then and on short of that, we had another conversation with Monica Adams, where she came on the show and she was talking about like her mission and purpose in her life. And when she tells her story about her dad and what she believed to be a ghost and all that stuff, it was a very theatrical story, and one that, but I believe that she truly believed, and I can't take it away from her. But the power and the impact that had on her is clearly communicated when she's telling you the story, and it makes you feel that power and that impact and that explanation. And so I really love both of those conversations. Those are the ones that kind of stuck with me, that was like, okay, we're changing lives now, and this feels good.
That's awesome, man. So where do you see the podcast going? Where do you want to take it? Next year after that, what's a big vision for it?
Oh man, all the vision.
All
of it. Like, so my goals for the podcast are relatively lofty. I want this platform to be as big as it can possibly be. Because I want to be able to reach people and to help people. You can't do the healing that we want to do if we can't get in front of the people to do it. And that's the thing. So I'm going to work hard this next year to really try to grow and develop the platform. We have such a good foundation with what we're doing with the Grunt Style Foundation, what we have with Dogs for Our Brave, and a few of the other organizations, what we're doing with Operation Purify, with Savage Encounter, what we're doing with Becoming Ohm, and all of these organizations. And we've even networked. We have a Kate out of Australia. She's a podcaster down there in Australia that I shot one with the other day. All of these people are doing this great work, and we're just one of the cogs in this big giant machine that's kind of turning, that I believe is like you said, it's a psychedelic revolution, and it's one that's coming. So I want to just be able to keep providing a platform for my guests to where we can keep having educated conversations. The biggest thing that we were really hoping to do when we started the podcast was to really be a part of pushing critical thinking again, because I feel like that was a skill that was being lost in our society. And if anything, I wanted to teach people how to critically think again. It's not about me being right or wrong. It's just like, listen to what I have to say, then use these skills to critically think about what I'm saying, and then determine whether you believe what I'm saying. Because that's the ultimate choice, is like, do you believe what I'm saying? Is this your truth? If it's not your truth, then what else have you done to expand your mind? What other truths seem to be a better fit for you? And that's a lot of where we're heading, is just trying to get in that. But we're going to get YouTube. We got some video coming up at the end of this month. We have some things that we're going to be doing in the show, new conversations. We're going to be expanding our horizons, so to speak, a lot into like the sexual health space, the physical health space. We're going to get even higher level into like covering psychedelic medicine. And I'll be going to the Capitol after the first of the year. We're going to be doing live press coverage from the Capitol on the legislation and all this stuff going on with psilocybin. Cool. So, I don't know where the future is going to hold us, but I want to keep doing what we're doing, but on a much grander scale this time next year. And then, then eventually, hopefully find my way to where we're facilitating retreats, and we're doing things that are providing the healing much more than just sitting here talking about it.
I love it, man. You're definitely at that. There's an inflection point right now, and you're really well positioned to ride that wave of support and just curiosity. Right, that's starting to take over, and I see it, and it's cool that you're in this space, because people. I don't believe in coincidence. People arrive and start things at the right time because it's the right time, and the right person fills that void, and you're filling that void. I'm not a psychedelic based or plant medicine based podcast. I do fitness and health, right? So this fits in well, but you're having the conversations regularly. I mean, you're at 50 episodes already, and you're just getting off the ground. So clearly there's a ton of people that want to have these conversations, and you're broadcasting it to the masses, and it'll inevitably go mainstream. And I'm really excited for what you're doing and your YouTube channel. So I know there's going to be more conversations that we're going to have in the future. I think we're just scratching the surface here, but
for sure.
Honest. So obviously there's an open invite to come back on the podcast, but for folks that want to reach out to you and find out a little bit more, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Oh, absolutely, man. I appreciate that. I want to come back on the show and continue to have conversations with you. Like I said, I was stoked about being on the show. So, this is the first time that I've been nervous on a mic. So, it's, I don't get that very often, but, well, you are the #1 military veterans podcast. Like, it pains me to say that a little bit.
Army veteran.
Number 2-1.
So we can subdivide it a little
There's
bit.
a disclaimer. We just go, you say #1 on your website. There. On your website, it says #1. So I just have to. So we just.
Yeah, the world's, because it's true, it's the world's best Army veteran podcast. That's it.
Yeah. So see, we went into the plant medicine space, so we didn't have to compete. We were just. We're like, we'll just be over here. But anybody out there that's interested in finding our content, why don't you check us out on our website at www.thestonedapespodcast.com. On our website, you can see our upcoming shows. It's we update our list there. We have our latest news. You can find a streaming player that'll stream most of our episodes. In there, you can also get to our social media accounts. We're on all your favorite social media platforms. We stream on all your favorite streaming platforms, whether it be Apple, Google, podcast, Pandora, Spotify. All of those links are out there. So, the biggest thing is just find us on one of those platforms, get on our website, give us a check out and see what you think. And then, we have enough episodes. There should be an episode there for just about anybody. And then if we don't have something there that piqued your interest, come back and keep checking, because we're probably going to have something dropping here pretty soon that will.
Awesome. I love it, man. So folks, you know what you got to do. Go follow the podcast, go give it a like and a review. It goes a long way. And when that YouTube channel's up, you'll definitely have to let us know, because we'll have to share it on the Hardtail Community's YouTube page as well. So
we have it up now, but there's one video, and but it's with my favorite music artist in the whole world. So, we had to make it happen. Right, it's coming.
Right on. Okay. Awesome. Slowly but surely, it's a slow grind, and the more we can share audiences within this space, the more we'll get in the know and become healthier and thrive through the next few years and become harder to kill. So, Anthony, thanks so much for sitting down and chatting on the podcast. Definitely, it was a hoot. And don't forget, folks, train hard, fight easy. See you on the next one. Peace. I hate t-shirts that get floppy in the arms after 10 washes. So that's why I created a bunch of t-shirts with high quality cotton just for you so that you can go to the gym and look fresh, sport some philosophy, and smash those PRs looking good. So you need to head to davemorrow.net/merch, grab yourself a hat, grab yourself a t-shirt, grab yourself a sweater, and support the cause today.